Have you ever wondered why the most powerful men in history fell before a single woman? Why kings abdicated thrones, generals abandoned battles, and wise men lost all reason? Carl Jung, one of humanity's greatest psychologists, discovered something disturbing about feminine nature that modern society prefers to ignore. Jung revealed that there exists a dark and magnetic aspect of the feminine that acts as a primordial force, capable of awakening man's most destructive instincts. This isn't about misogyny, but about a profound psychological truth that explains why entire civilizations crumbled when this force was misunderstood. In this video, you'll discover the hidden secrets of the feminine psyche that Jung unveiled through decades of research. Prepare yourself for a disturbing journey through the human mind, where the sacred and profane meet, and where temptation reveals its most dangerous face. Deep within every woman lies a hidden darkness that most people never see. This isn't about evil or malice, but about a primal force that exists in the depths of the female psyche. Jung spent years studying this phenomenon, and what he found shocked even him. The feminine shadow operates like a magnetic field, pulling men toward destruction, without them even realizing what's happening. This shadow manifests in ways that seem innocent on the surface. A gentle touch that lingers too long, a look that promises everything while giving nothing, words that heal and wound at the same time. These aren't calculated moves, but natural expressions of an ancient power that women carry within them. The shadow knows exactly how to find a man's weakness and exploit it with surgical precision. What makes this force so dangerous is its subtlety. Unlike masculine aggression, which announces itself loudly, the feminine shadow works in silence. It seeps into a man's mind like water through cracks in stone, slowly breaking down his defenses until he's completely vulnerable. By the time he realizes what's happening, it's already too late. This shadow isn't something women choose to activate. It's an unconscious part of their nature that emerges when they feel threatened, abandoned, or unloved. In these moments, the nurturing mother transforms into something far more dangerous. The same hands that once offered comfort now withhold it as punishment. The same voice that once spoke sweet words now cuts with razor-sharp criticism. Jung discovered that this shadow serves an evolutionary purpose. It's nature's way of ensuring that women can survive and protect their offspring even in the most hostile environments. When a woman feels her security threatened, this dark aspect awakens to eliminate the threat by any means necessary. It's a survival mechanism that has been passed down through countless generations. The most frightening aspect of this shadow is how it can turn love into a weapon. A woman in the grip of her shadow can use a man's deepest feelings against him. She knows his fears, his dreams, his insecurities, and she can weaponize this knowledge with devastating effect. What was once shared in moments of intimacy becomes ammunition for psychological warfare. This shadow also explains why some women seem to attract chaos wherever they go. They don't consciously seek drama, but their unconscious shadow creates situations that feed on emotional turmoil. Men find themselves drawn to these women like moths to flame, unable to resist despite knowing the danger. The shadow promises passion, excitement, and intensity that ordinary relationships can't provide. The tragedy is that women often don't understand this power they possess. They feel its effects but can't control it. They see the destruction it causes in their relationships, but feel helpless to stop it. This creates a cycle of guilt and self-destruction that can last for years. The shadow becomes both their greatest weapon and their deepest curse. Jung believed that acknowledging this shadow was the first step toward healing. Women who deny its existence remain at its mercy, acting out destructive patterns without understanding why. But those who face this darkness within themselves can begin to integrate it in healthy ways. They can harness its power for protection and strength rather than destruction. The key insight Jung offered was that this shadow isn't evil in itself. It's a natural part of the human psyche that becomes dangerous only when it's repressed or misunderstood. Like fire, it can either warm a home or burn it down, depending on how it's handled. The difference lies in conscious awareness and deliberate choice. Understanding this shadow also helps men recognize when they're being influenced by it. They can learn to see the warning signs and protect themselves without becoming defensive or hostile. This knowledge doesn't make women the enemy, but helps both sexes understand the deeper forces at work in their relationships. The feminine shadow will always exist because it serves a vital function in human psychology. The goal isn't to eliminate it, but to bring it into conscious awareness where it can be channeled constructively. When women understand their shadow and men recognize its influence, relationships can move beyond the destructive patterns that have plagued humanity for centuries. 2. The seductive power of the destructive anima. Every man carries within his unconscious mind an image of the perfect woman. Jung called this the anima, and it's one of the most powerful forces in male psychology. This inner feminine figure shapes how men see all women and influences every romantic relationship they'll ever have. But here's what Jung discovered that most people don't know. The anima has a dark side that can lead men to their complete destruction. The anima doesn't just represent love and beauty, it also embodies chaos, madness, and death. When a man encounters a woman who activates his destructive anima, he loses all sense of reason and self-preservation. He becomes obsessed, consumed by desires that he can't control or understand. This isn't simple attraction, but a psychological possession that can destroy everything he's built in his life. This destructive anima appears in many forms. Sometimes she's the mysterious stranger who promises forbidden pleasures. Other times she's the wounded woman who needs saving, drawing men into endless cycles of rescue and disappointment. She might be the creative muse who inspires great art while slowly draining the artist's life force. In each case, she offers something irresistible while demanding everything in return. What makes this force so dangerous is how it bypasses rational thought. When a man's destructive anima is activated, he stops thinking clearly. He ignores warning signs, dismisses advice from friends and family, and makes decisions that his rational mind would never approve. It's as if he's been hypnotized by an invisible force that compels him toward his own destruction. The anima works through projection. Men see in certain women qualities that exist only in their imagination. They fall in love not with the real person, but with their own inner feminine image projected onto her. This creates an impossible situation where the woman can never live up to the idealized image, leading to inevitable disappointment and conflict. This projection process is particularly dangerous because it's completely unconscious. The man has no idea he's seeing a fantasy rather than reality. He believes his intense feelings are caused by the woman's actual qualities, not by his own psychological projections. This delusion can persist for years, causing tremendous suffering for both parties involved. The destructive anima also feeds on a man's unresolved relationship with his mother. If he never properly separated from the maternal influence, he remains vulnerable to women who remind him of that early bond. These women can manipulate his deepest emotional needs, keeping him trapped in childlike dependence while slowly draining his masculine power. Jung observed that men who are possessed by their destructive anima often become passive and weak. They lose their natural assertiveness and begin to seek approval from women rather than following their own path. This creates a vicious cycle where their weakness attracts women who enjoy dominating men, reinforcing the destructive pattern. The anima also has a vampiric quality. It feeds on masculine energy, creativity, and life force. Men who are caught in its grip often experience chronic fatigue, depression, and a loss of motivation. They pour all their energy into relationships that give nothing back, leaving them depleted and empty. Their dreams and ambitions fade as they become increasingly dependent on female approval. This destructive force is particularly active during midlife crises. Men who have suppressed their anima for years suddenly find themselves overwhelmed by powerful feminine energies. They may abandon their families, leave stable careers, or engage in reckless behaviors that destroy everything they've worked for. The anima demands recognition, and if it's been ignored too long, it can erupt with devastating force. The key to protecting against the destructive anima lies in conscious awareness. Men need to understand that their most intense attractions often have nothing to do with the actual woman involved. They're responding to their own inner feminine nature, which has been projected onto an external figure. This awareness can help them make more rational choices about relationships. Integration is the ultimate solution. Instead of projecting the anima onto external women, men need to develop their own inner feminine qualities. This means embracing creativity, intuition, and emotional sensitivity as part of their complete personality. When these qualities are integrated, the compulsive need to find them in women diminishes. The goal isn't to eliminate the anima, but to understand its dual nature. It can be both creative and destructive, inspiring and dangerous. Men who learn to work with their anima consciously can access its positive qualities while avoiding its destructive potential. This requires ongoing self-awareness and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about their own psychology. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. When the mother becomes devouring. The most terrifying transformation in human psychology happens when the nurturing mother becomes something that devours instead of nourishes. Jung discovered that every woman carries within her the potential for this dark metamorphosis, and when it awakens, it can destroy everything in its path. This isn't about bad mothers or evil women, but about a primal force that emerges when the maternal instinct becomes twisted and corrupted. The devouring mother appears when a woman's need to be needed becomes so intense that she suffocates those she claims to love. She begins to see her children, husband, or loved ones not as separate individuals, but as extensions of herself that must never be allowed to leave. What starts as protective care slowly transforms into a prison of emotional manipulation and control. This transformation often happens gradually, making it difficult to recognize until it's too late. The woman begins to create emergencies and crises that require her constant intervention. She becomes indispensable by making everyone around her helpless. Her loved ones find themselves unable to make decisions without her approval, unable to function without her guidance, and unable to imagine life without her presence. The devouring mother feeds on dependency. She creates situations where others must rely on her, then uses that dependency to maintain control. She might sabotage her children's attempts at independence, undermine her husband's confidence, or create health problems that require constant attention. Each act of dependence feeds her sense of importance and value. What makes this pattern so destructive is that it masquerades as love. The devouring mother genuinely believes she's acting in everyone's best interest. She tells herself that her children can't survive without her, that her husband would fail without her support, that her friends would be lost without her guidance. This self-deception makes her behavior particularly dangerous because she fights against any attempt to change it. The victims of a devouring mother often struggle with guilt and confusion. They feel angry about the control and manipulation, but they also feel grateful for the care and attention. This creates an internal conflict that can last for decades. They want to break free but feel guilty about abandoning someone who has sacrificed so much for them. Jung observed that men who grow up with devouring mothers often have difficulty forming healthy relationships with women. They either seek women who will control them like their mother did, or they become terrified of female intimacy altogether. They may find themselves attracted to women who seem helpless and needy, allowing them to replay the familiar dynamic of caretaker and dependent. The devouring mother also creates what Jung called the eternal child. These are people who never fully mature because they were never allowed to face real challenges or make genuine mistakes. They remain psychologically dependent on maternal figures throughout their lives, seeking women who will take care of them, rather than partners who will challenge them to grow. This pattern can continue for generations. Daughters of devouring mothers often become devouring mothers themselves, repeating the cycle with their own children. They learned that love means control, that caring means never letting go, and that value comes from being needed rather than being wanted. The devouring mother fears abandonment more than death itself. This fear drives her to increasingly desperate measures to maintain control. She might fake illnesses, create financial dependencies, or use emotional blackmail to prevent anyone from leaving. The more she tries to hold on, the more she pushes people away, creating the very abandonment she fears. Recognition of this pattern is the first step toward healing. The woman must acknowledge that her nurturing has become toxic, that her love has become a cage, and that her protection has become imprisonment. This recognition is often deeply painful because it challenges her fundamental sense of identity and worth. The devouring mother must learn to find value in something other than being needed. She needs to develop her own interests, her own identity, and her own sources of meaning that don't depend on controlling others. This process requires tremendous courage because it means facing the fear of abandonment that drives her behavior. For those who have been victims of a devouring mother, recovery involves learning to trust their own judgment and capabilities. They must overcome the conditioning that told them they were helpless and incompetent. This often requires professional help because the psychological damage runs so deep. The healthy maternal instinct knows when to hold on and when to let go. It provides security and support, but also encourages independence and growth. The devouring mother, by contrast, sees independence as betrayal and growth as abandonment. She wants to keep her loved ones as helpless children forever. Jung believed that understanding this dark aspect of the maternal archetype was crucial for psychological health. Both men and women need to recognize when nurturing becomes devouring, when protection becomes imprisonment, and when love becomes control. Only through this awareness can the destructive pattern be broken. The goal isn't to eliminate the maternal instinct, but to keep it in balance. The healthy mother knows that true love sometimes means letting go, that real protection involves teaching independence, and that genuine care requires allowing others to make their own mistakes and learn from them. 4. The femme fatale in the collective unconscious. Hidden deep within the human psyche lies an ancient image that has haunted men for thousands of years. Jung called this the femme fatale archetype, and it represents one of the most powerful and dangerous forces in the collective unconscious. This isn't just about seductive women in movies or novels, but about a primal pattern that shapes how men respond to certain types of feminine energy. The femme fatale archetype emerged from humanity's earliest experiences with feminine power. In prehistoric times, men learned that women could be both life-givers and life-takers, creators and destroyers. This dual nature became embedded in the collective unconscious, creating an image of the woman who promises everything while delivering death. This archetype manifests in every culture throughout history. She appears as the siren who lures sailors to their doom, the witch who casts spells of destruction, the temptress who leads heroes astray from their noble quests. These aren't just stories, but psychological truths about the power of feminine energy to disrupt and destroy masculine order. What makes the femme fatale so dangerous is that she offers what every man secretly desires: complete surrender to feminine power. She promises to take away all responsibility, all struggle, all pain. In return, she asks only for his complete submission. This bargain seems attractive to men who are tired of carrying the burden of masculine responsibility. The femme fatale operates through seduction, but her seduction isn't just physical. She seduces the mind, the emotions, and the spirit. She makes men believe that she holds the key to their deepest desires, that she can give them what they've been searching for their entire lives. This psychological seduction is far more powerful than any physical attraction. Jung discovered that men who are vulnerable to the femme fatale often have unresolved issues with their own feminine nature. They've rejected or suppressed their inner feminine qualities, creating a psychological vacuum that the femme fatale fills. She becomes the container for all the feminine energy they've denied within themselves. The femme fatale also feeds on masculine guilt and shame. Many men carry unconscious guilt about their power, their aggression, their success. The femme fatale offers them a way to punish themselves for these supposed sins. By surrendering to her, they can experience the destruction they unconsciously feel they deserve. This archetype is particularly active in times of social change, when traditional gender roles are being challenged. When men feel uncertain about their place in the world, they become more susceptible to feminine forces that promise to resolve their confusion. The femme fatale offers simple solutions to complex problems, but these solutions always come at a terrible price. The collective unconscious maintains this image because it serves a psychological function. The femme fatale represents the shadow side of feminine power, the aspect that can destroy as well as create. By keeping this image alive, the psyche reminds men that not all feminine energy is nurturing and safe. Modern media has commercialized the femme fatale archetype, turning it into entertainment and fantasy, but this commercialization has made the archetype more dangerous, not less. Men are constantly exposed to images of dangerous women who promise pleasure and excitement, conditioning them to find destruction attractive. The femme fatale also represents freedom from moral constraints. She operates outside the rules that govern ordinary relationships, promising experiences that conventional women can't provide. This freedom is intoxicating to men who feel trapped by social expectations and responsibilities. Jung observed that the femme fatale often appears during midlife crises, when men are questioning their life choices. She represents the road not taken, the adventures not pursued, the passion not experienced. She offers a second chance at youth and excitement, but this second chance is actually a trap that leads to destruction. The key to protecting against the femme fatale lies in understanding what she represents. She's not a real woman, but a projection of masculine fears and desires. Men who encounter women who seem to embody this archetype are actually meeting their own shadow reflected back at them. Integration requires men to develop their own relationship with their inner feminine nature. When they can access their own creativity, intuition, and emotional depth, they become less vulnerable to external feminine forces that promise to provide these qualities. They no longer need to project their feminine nature onto dangerous women. The collective unconscious will always maintain the femme fatale archetype because it serves as a warning about the destructive potential of unintegrated feminine energy. The goal isn't to eliminate this archetype, but to understand its message and learn from its wisdom. Recognition of the femme fatale pattern can help men make better choices in relationships. They can learn to distinguish between women who genuinely care for them and those who seek to exploit their vulnerabilities. This discrimination is crucial for psychological health and relationship success. The femme fatale will continue to appear in dreams, fantasies, and projections as long as men remain unconscious of their own feminine nature. She serves as both a warning and an invitation, a warning about the dangers of unintegrated feminine energy, and an invitation to develop a conscious relationship with the feminine aspects of their own psyche. 5. The sweet poison of emotional manipulation. The most dangerous weapon in a woman's arsenal isn't physical strength or logical argument, but something far more subtle and devastating: emotional manipulation. Jung discovered that women possess an intuitive understanding of emotional currents that allows them to influence others in ways that remain completely invisible to their victims. This isn't conscious evil, but an unconscious skill that emerges from the feminine connection to feeling and relationship. Emotional manipulation works because it bypasses the rational mind and goes straight to the heart. While men typically use direct confrontation to get what they want, women have learned to achieve their goals through emotional influence. They understand that people make decisions based on feelings, not facts, and they can shape those feelings with surgical precision. This manipulation often begins with kindness and understanding. The woman positions herself as the only person who truly understands the man's pain, his struggles, his dreams. She becomes his emotional sanctuary, the place where he can be vulnerable and authentic. But this sanctuary comes with hidden costs that only become apparent much later. The manipulator creates emotional dependency by being the solution to problems she secretly helps create. She might undermine a man's confidence in other relationships, making him feel that she's the only one who truly accepts him. She becomes indispensable by making him feel incompetent in emotional matters, positioning herself as the expert on feelings and relationships. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools in this arsenal. The manipulator has an uncanny ability to make others feel responsible for her emotional state. She suffers publicly and dramatically, ensuring that everyone around her knows exactly how their actions affect her feelings. This creates a constant state of walking on eggshells, where others modify their behavior to avoid causing her pain. The manipulator also uses what Jung called emotional blackmail. She threatens to withdraw love, affection, or support unless her demands are met. These threats are rarely explicit, but communicated through mood changes, silence, tears, or expressions of disappointment. The victim learns to read these signals and comply to restore emotional harmony. Another common tactic is playing the victim while actually being the aggressor. The manipulator provokes reactions in others, then positions herself as the injured party when they respond. She has an extraordinary ability to push people's buttons until they lose their temper, then use their anger as proof of their cruelty and her innocence. The manipulator creates what Jung called emotional chaos. She stirs up conflicts between people, shares confidences that shouldn't be shared, and creates drama that keeps everyone off balance. In this chaos, she becomes the center of attention and the apparent peacemaker, even though she's actually the source of the conflict. Competition is another powerful tool. The manipulator makes others compete for her attention and approval, creating artificial scarcity around her emotional resources. She might compare people to each other, praise one while criticizing another, or create triangular relationships where multiple people vie for her favor. The most sophisticated manipulators use intermittent reinforcement. They alternate between kindness and cruelty, love and rejection, support and criticism. This creates an addictive pattern where the victim becomes desperate for the next moment of approval, never knowing when it will come or what will trigger its withdrawal. Jung observed that emotional manipulation often stems from a deep sense of powerlessness. Women who feel they have no direct power in their relationships or circumstances learn to influence others through emotional means. This becomes a survival strategy that can persist even when direct power becomes available. The manipulator also exploits the masculine desire to fix and solve problems. She presents herself as damaged or troubled, triggering the man's protective instincts. But her problems are never actually solved because solving them would eliminate her power source. She needs to remain broken to maintain control. Recognition of emotional manipulation requires understanding the difference between authentic emotion and performed emotion. Authentic emotions arise naturally from circumstances and fade over time. Performed emotions are strategic, timed for maximum impact, and designed to produce specific responses in others. The victim of emotional manipulation often experiences confusion, self-doubt, and a sense of walking on eggshells. They find themselves constantly apologizing, explaining their actions, and trying to manage someone else's emotional state. Their own needs become secondary to maintaining the manipulator's emotional equilibrium. Breaking free from emotional manipulation requires developing emotional independence. The victim must learn to trust their own perceptions, validate their own feelings, and refuse to take responsibility for someone else's emotional state. This process often requires professional help because the psychological conditioning runs so deep. The manipulator must also face the truth about her behavior. She needs to acknowledge that her emotional influence is actually a form of control, that her suffering is often strategic, and that her need for emotional power is damaging her relationships. This recognition is difficult because it challenges her fundamental sense of identity. Healthy emotional expression involves taking responsibility for one's own feelings while respecting others' emotional boundaries. It means asking directly for what you need rather than manipulating others into providing it. It requires courage to be vulnerable without being manipulative. Jung believed that understanding emotional manipulation was crucial for psychological growth. Both men and women need to recognize when emotions are being used as weapons rather than authentic expressions of inner states. Only through this awareness can genuine emotional intimacy be achieved. 6. The inner witch of every woman. Deep within every woman's psyche lurks an ancient power that Jung called the inner witch. This isn't about supernatural abilities or medieval superstitions, but about a primal feminine force that can cast spells of destruction through psychological means. Every woman carries this potential, and when it awakens, it can transform a loving partner into a source of terror and chaos. The inner witch emerges when a woman feels threatened, abandoned, or betrayed. In these moments, her rational mind retreats and something far more primitive takes control. This ancient part of her psyche remembers times when women needed to defend themselves and their children through cunning, intuition, and psychological warfare. The weapons may have changed, but the instincts remain the same. This witch-like power manifests through an uncanny ability to know exactly what will hurt someone the most. She can identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities with supernatural precision, then exploit them with devastating effectiveness. She knows which words will cut deepest, which actions will cause the most pain, and which timing will maximize the damage. The inner witch operates through what appears to be feminine intuition, but is actually a form of psychological warfare. She can sense when someone is lying, when they're vulnerable, when they're hiding something. This knowledge becomes ammunition that she can use to maintain control or exact revenge. Nothing remains hidden from her penetrating gaze. When the witch awakens, a woman's entire energy changes. Her voice becomes different. Her eyes hold a new intensity, and her presence fills the room with an almost tangible darkness. Men who encounter this transformation often describe feeling like they're facing something inhuman, something that wears the face of their loved one but contains a completely different essence. The inner witch is particularly dangerous because she knows all the intimate details of her victim's life. She has access to secrets, fears, insecurities, and dreams that were shared in moments of trust and vulnerability. This intimate knowledge becomes weaponized, turning love into a source of pain and connection, into a tool of destruction. This dark feminine power also manifests through curse-like behavior. The witch can make prophetic statements that seem to come true through psychological influence. She might predict failure, abandonment, or disaster, then behave in ways that make these predictions self-fulfilling. Her words carry a weight that goes beyond normal communication. The witch energy feeds on conflict and drama. She creates situations that generate emotional intensity. stirring up chaos wherever she goes. She thrives on the energy of anger, fear, and confusion, using these emotions to fuel her power. Peace and harmony actually weaken her, so she unconsciously sabotages anything that might lead to genuine resolution. Jung observed that the inner witch often emerges during times of hormonal change in women's lives. Menstruation, pregnancy, menopause, and other biological transitions can trigger this ancient energy. The witch represents the shadow side of feminine creativity, the destructive force that complements the creative force of new life. The witch also has a collective aspect. She connects individual women to an ancient sisterhood of feminine power that transcends time and culture. When one woman's witch awakens, it can trigger similar responses in other women, creating a network of dark feminine energy that can influence entire communities. This power is particularly active in relationships with weak or passive men. The witch has no respect for weakness and will torture men who fail to stand up to her. She tests masculine strength through increasingly provocative behavior, hoping to find someone who can match her power. When she finds only weakness, she becomes contemptuous and cruel. The inner witch also represents a woman's connection to her own wild nature. She embodies the untamed feminine energy that civilization has tried to suppress. In some ways, she's a healthy response to centuries of patriarchal control, a way for women to reclaim their power and refuse to be victims. However, when this power is unconscious and unintegrated, it becomes destructive. The woman becomes possessed by forces she doesn't understand, acting out patterns that damage her relationships and her own well-being. She becomes a victim of her own power, controlled by the very forces she thought she was wielding. Recognition of the inner witch requires honest self-examination. Women must acknowledge that they possess this dark power and take responsibility for how they use it. They need to understand the triggers that awaken the witch and learn to channel this energy constructively rather than destructively. Integration involves honoring the witch's power while bringing it under conscious control. This means recognizing when the witch energy is arising and making deliberate choices about how to express it. The goal isn't to eliminate this aspect of feminine nature, but to use it wisely and appropriately. The inner witch will always exist because she serves important psychological functions. She protects women from genuine threats, maintains healthy boundaries, and preserves feminine power in a world that often seeks to diminish it. The key is learning to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate expressions of this energy. Men who understand the inner witch can better navigate their relationships with women. They can recognize when this energy is active and respond appropriately, neither cowering in fear nor dismissing it as mere emotionalism. This understanding can help create more balanced and authentic relationships between the sexes. The witch energy also has creative potential. When properly channeled, it can fuel artistic expression, spiritual insight, and transformative healing. Many women who learn to work with their inner witch discover that it's actually a source of tremendous creative power that can be used for positive purposes. Carl Jung's revelations about the feminine shadow force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The very qualities that make women most alluring, their intuitive power, emotional depth, and mysterious nature, can also become instruments of profound destruction. This isn't about demonizing women or glorifying men, but about understanding the dual nature of all human energy. The feminine contains both the power to create life and the power to destroy it, just as the masculine contains both the capacity for protection and domination. Jung's greatest insight wasn't that women are dangerous, but that all psychological forces become destructive when they remain unconscious and unintegrated. The path forward lies not in fear or suppression, but in conscious awareness and mutual understanding between the sexes. Only when both men and women acknowledge these shadow aspects can we move beyond the ancient patterns of seduction and destruction toward genuine intimacy and growth.